Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. One of the central themes that is articulated in the Grand Inquisitor chapter of Fyodor Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov is that of correcting the deed or correcting God's work. And the work not just that God as a creator did, but that Jesus Christ as God incarnate did earlier than the Grand Inquisitor, who's now confronting somebody who he believes to be Christ within this poem or story that Ivan Karamazov is telling. And this term is used several times of correction. Now, there's a bit of context to this that we've talked about elsewhere and analyzed in considerable detail, so we don't need to hit on all of that. But what is the Grand Inquisitor doing? He's criticizing Christ, who's had arrested and put into a cell so you can do a one-on-one with him, for showing up to, as he puts it, interfere. So he says, everything has been handed over to you by the Pope, therefore everything now belongs to the Pope, and you may as well not come at all, or at least don't interfere with us for the time being. They not only speak this way, this is Ivan talking, at least the Jesuits do. I've read it in their theologians myself. Have you the right to proclaim to us even one of the mysteries of that world from which you have come? My old man asks him and answers the question himself. No, you have not. So as not to add to what has already been said once, and so as not to deprive people of freedom, for which you stood so firmly while you were on earth. Anything you would proclaim anew will encroach upon the freedom of men's faith. It will come as a miracle, and the freedom of their faith was the dearest of things. So he's saying, basically, Christ, you've caught yourself in kind of a bind. You handed things over to us. And since you did that, you can't show up and take anything back, add anything new. That is not up to you. And if we want to review a little bit, there are these three temptations that are discussed by the Grand Inquisitor. This is what you find in the Gospel of Matthew, a very, very famous passage, right? The three temptations are turn the bread into stones, and so providing people with material comfort, throw yourself, and the angels will pick you up, mystery, authority, and mysticism. And then, if you want, you can take control over all of the countries of the earth. So earthly power. And Christ rejected all three of these. Why? Because he wanted to preserve freedom for people to actually love, have faith, act in a way following him of their own accord. And the Grand Inquisitor is going to mention to him over and over again, that works fine for this tiny little sliver of humankind, but that leaves everybody else behind because most human beings are too weak. Your freedom is suitable for the strong, not for the weak, who are the majority of humankind. And since you turned over the religion to us, we are going to make things better. We are going to fix what you didn't fix as you promised. And so, you can learn about all the other ones by looking at other discussions. What I want to focus on here is that the Grand Inquisitor tells Christ, we corrected your deed. We corrected what it is that you did, your work. And so he says, mankind rejoiced. They were once more led like sheep, and that such a terrible gift, which had brought them so much suffering and been taken from their hearts. Tell me, were we right in teaching and doing so? Have we not indeed loved mankind, and in so humbly recognizing their impotence, so lovingly alleviating their burden, allowing their feeble nature even now to sin with our permission? Why have you come to interfere with us now, right? And this is a really telling moment. He's saying, we have done a better job than you did, Christ. We truly loved humanity. Not just the strong, not just those who could accept your message, the chosen ones. We love everybody. We understand their weakness, and we find ways to take away the freedom that is going to trouble them, and provide genuine human happiness, not just for a few people, but ideally for everyone. Now, it's not a completely finished plan, of course, as he's going to say, we've got still some work to do. Our work is still in its very beginnings, but it has begun. There's still long to wait before its completion. The earth still has much to suffer, but we shall accomplish it, and we shall be Caesars, and then we shall think about the universal happiness of humanity. So, again, he's saying, you were great for what you did, but you didn't think about the majority of the people, the totality of human beings. And he's going to say something really quite interesting here. There's a long discussion of what's going to be happening and turning over their consciences. And he says, okay, when this actually happens, everybody will be happy. Why? Because these people will bring everything to us, and we will decide all things, and they will joyfully believe our decision, because it delivers them from their great care and their present terrible torments of personal and free decision. So all the millions of creatures will be happy, except for the 100,000 who won't be. And who are these? He tells us, there will be thousands of millions of happy babes and 100,000 sufferers who have taken upon themselves the curse of the knowledge of good and evil. The 100,000 who govern them. The ones who know the reality. The ones who exercise freedom, who have fuller freedom, taking away the freedom of the masses, who are now rendered happy. And these 100,000 are not actually going to be happy. As a matter of fact, they have to lie. They have to, use power on other people, but they're doing it for the good of humanity. And he says, peacefully they'll die, peacefully they'll expire in your name. Beyond the grave, they'll find only death. We will keep the secret, and for their own happiness, we will entice them with a heavenly and eternal reward. So they have to promise the people something that they know they're not going to have along the way. And he talks about thousands of millions of happy babes who do not know sin, we who took their sins upon ourselves for their happiness. If we have to stand before you, we can say, judge us if you can and dare. And here, the Grand Inquisitor says something about himself that's really quite interesting. So he's been talking about the big master plan. He says, I at one time was one of yours, Christ. I was one of the chosen. He says, I too was in the wilderness. I too ate locusts and roots. I too blessed freedom with which you have blessed mankind. And I too was preparing to enter the number of your chosen ones, the number of the strong and mighty, with a thirst that the number be complete. So he is preparing to follow Christ completely, to be part of this blessed community, which is a small and chosen and select community. And instead, he awakes and has a change of heart. He said, I awoke and I did not want to serve madness. I returned and joined the host of those, once again we see this term, who have corrected your deed. So the Grand Inquisitor is not the first person to come up with this. The Grand Inquisitor is joining a long lineage, a community of people that have been doing this, perhaps going all the way back to the original Christian community around this figure of Christ. He says, I left the proud and returned to the humble for the happiness of the humble. What I am telling you will come true, and our kingdom will be established. So he's telling him, tomorrow we're going to take you out and burn you. And see all these people around here who are happy to see you come? They will join in and rejoice about your sacrifice. And we will move forward with the plan. Here in the telling of the story, we jump out of that narrative frame that Ivan has been telling and to a conversation between Alyosha and Ivan. And Alyosha is a little skeptical of this. Alyosha says, that's absurd. First of all, your poem praises Jesus. It doesn't revile him as you meant to. And he says, and who will believe you about freedom? Is that any way to understand it? And then he goes on and we get to the real crux. Is there such a fantastic person as your inquisitor? This must be just a fantasy. This is an imagination. This can't be real. He says, we know the Jesuits, bad things are said about them, but are they what you have here? They're not that at all. They're just a Roman army for a future universal earthly kingdom with the emperor, the pontiff of Rome at their head. That's their ideal, but without any mysteries or lofty sadness, just the lust for power, for filthy earthly lucre, enslavement. They're not into doing things for the benefit of mankind and telling noble lies that, torture their own consciences, sacrificing themselves in potentially a Christian way for the good of everybody else. And Ivan says, well, don't be so quick. He says, a fantasy? Let it be. Of course it's a fantasy. But let me ask you this. Do you really think that this whole Catholic movement of the past few centuries is really nothing but the lust for power only for the sake of filthy lucre? And Alyosha says, no, that's not it. And then Ivan says, why should your Jesuits and inquisitors have joined together only for material, wicked lucre gain, right? Why can't there happen to be among them at least one sufferer who is tormented, like my inquisitor, right? Who is tormented by great sadness and loves humankind. One who ate roots in the desert and raved, overcoming his flesh in order to make himself free and perfect, but still loved human beings all his life and suddenly opened his eyes and saw there's no great moral blessedness in achieving perfection of the will, only to become convinced at the same time that millions of the rest of God's creatures have been set up only for mockery, that they will never be strong enough to manage their freedom, that from such pitiful rebels will never come giants to complete the tower, that it was not for such geese that the great idealist had his dream of harmony. So this is a possibility, is it not? And Alyosha, will have to grant that. Yes, it's possible there could be such a person. And Ivan is going to go on and characterize this as joining the intelligent people and the intelligent spirit, which is the name here for the devil, right? Which the Grand Inquisitor says, yes, we joined the side of the devil against you because the devil was actually in the right and you were in the wrong, Christ. Humanity matters. The things that are making them unhappy, we should take those away and we should provide them other things instead if we really do love humanity. Is it possible such a person could develop within an ascetic framework? It is possible, right? Ivan then is going to go on and say, I actually think it's not just possible. I actually think there are such people. He says, one man standing at the head of this army would be enough to bring out finally the real ruling idea of the whole Roman cause with its armies and Jesuits. I tell you outright, I firmly believe this one man has never been lacking among those standing at the head of the movement. Perhaps such ones have been found among the Roman popes. Who knows? Maybe this accursed old man who loves mankind so stubbornly in his own way exists even now in the form of a great host of such old men, and by no means accidentally, but in concert, as a secret union. And here he's going to suggest maybe the Masons are like that. Maybe that's why Jesuits and other Catholics and the Masons can't get along. They're actually rivals, both of them trying to steer the masses of mankind, humanity, towards a happier state and, denying human freedom in the process. And why would they be doing this? Not just because they want to correct God's work, but because they think it's necessary to correct God's work because God didn't do it right the first time. And that's where this exchange is going to leave off. This is really the culmination of the Grand Inquisitor chapter, other than, a little bit of repartee between the brothers involving a literary and action-oriented plagiarism on the part of Alyosha, which you can read about in the text. But this is really a key theme, and this is why people come back over and over again to this book, and specifically to this chapter, because it doesn't have to be necessarily about Inquisitions or Jesuits or Masons. This idea could be applied to many other groups or movements as well, and that's, you might say, some of the contemporary relevance that people see in this work.